Good evening and blessings to you all. In every human society, whether it's within a family, at work, or in any interpersonal relationship, the opinions of people are not the same. The wise have said, just as their faces are not alike, so too their opinions are not alike. Every person has a different opinion, and this is natural, especially in relationships, whether in marriage, parenting, or at work. People often have criticisms or complaints, and they express them. Sometimes these criticisms can lead to situations where the other person's self-esteem is shattered, whether it's parents criticizing their children, a husband criticizing his wife, or a wife criticizing her husband. When there is too much criticism, and it is expressed in an improper way, it can lead to destruction. On the other hand, when someone feels the need to speak up, they may wonder, if I don't speak up, how will the other person know what bothers me? How will they change? In general, there are two types of moral reproof. One is when a person hears criticism from others who reprove them and point out their mistakes. The other is when a person takes the initiative themselves, sitting down to study, opening books, listening to lessons, and seeking guidance on how to change. In chapter 12 of the book of Proverbs, King Solomon says the following: "He who loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is brutish." Here he speaks from the perspective of someone receiving discipline. Let us first reflect on his words regarding receiving discipline, and then we will consider what happens when we receive criticism that is hurtful or insulting, how we should respond in such a situation. Additionally, when we criticize others, what is the proper way to do so according to the Torah? This is such a central and important topic for life, because if we observe people we love or people we prefer to distance ourselves from, it usually relates to their speech. A person who creates a pleasant atmosphere around them always knows how to give the right word at the right time. Even when they have criticism to offer, they know how to say things thoughtfully. People are drawn to them, they love them, and their relationships thrive. Their children grow up with emotional health. However, a person who is angry, difficult, and always complaining, nothing ever satisfies them. They always have grievances, and when something bothers them, they lash out with harsh words. This creates destructive consequences not only for others, but for themselves as well. They ruin their own life, pushing away all those who love them, all their friends, even their family. Now let's look at Solomon's words. He who loves discipline loves knowledge. Solomon says that a person who loves discipline, meaning someone who wants to know how to behave correctly, truly desires it. This person loves knowledge, meaning they love wisdom, the right guidance for life. This person is humble and willing to learn. When a person is arrogant, they feel they know everything and must control others. They don't want anyone telling them what to do. They don't love discipline, but a person who loves discipline, says Solomon, loves knowledge. This means that person is wise. They are striving for completeness and want to know where they are not behaving properly so they can improve. That person opens books of moral guidance and learns to become wise. They don't wait for others to correct them. This is the highest form of perfection, to take initiative, to learn, and to grow. A great recommendation is to study Mesilat Yesharim, the Path of the Just. This book is filled with wisdom and practical advice for refining one's character. It teaches about the importance of being careful in one's actions, diligent in their endeavors, and ultimately striving for spiritual growth and holiness. The person who loves discipline is the one who seeks this kind of improvement, actively working to understand their flaws and learn how to correct them. By loving discipline, we open the door to wisdom and growth. This is the way to achieve true improvement in life, to become a better person, and to build healthier, more meaningful relationships. A person who recognizes within themselves that they are affected by the trait of laziness faces a problem. They are sluggish until they finally take action. It takes time, and afterward, they realize how much they've lost. A person who identifies that they are struggling with jealousy finds it consuming them. They cannot bear to see others doing well. If someone shares good news, such as a promotion, a new house, or a new car, they feel as if they are going to explode inside. It is important to recognize this within oneself, the issue of jealousy. A person who notices within themselves a pursuit of honor is always seeking to be praised, wanting people to constantly tell them how great they are, sometimes in exaggerated terms. Everyone feels comfortable when they are praised for something they have done well, but for this person, it feels excessive, and they may have an exaggerated desire for such recognition. Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the just, has entire chapters dedicated to the work of refining character traits. The book begins by outlining the fundamental steps for self-improvement. It starts with caution in one's actions, then moves to diligence, and ultimately progresses toward higher levels of spiritual development. It is based on the teachings of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, a disciple of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who was a giant in Torah and a highly respected figure. He provided a framework for spiritual growth, teaching how to begin, progress, and ultimately reach the highest level of spiritual connection, Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. The structure of Mesilat Yesharim follows these teachings, with a focus on each step in the ladder of self-improvement. It begins with Ze'irut, carefulness, and each chapter explains how to acquire and cultivate that trait in one's life. The book takes a person through each level of self-development, culminating in the highest form of spiritual enlightenment. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the author of Mesilat Yesharim, wrote the book concisely, yet filled with profound wisdom. His Hebrew may not be modern, but it is beautiful and precise. Those who learn to understand it often fall in love with his exact words and the depth they convey. People who initially find the book difficult often report that as they continue learning it, they begin to appreciate its wisdom. For those who find Mesilat Yesharim heavy or challenging, there are other books written in a more accessible, modern language. However, the key takeaway is that a person who loves discipline doesn't wait for others to correct them. They take the initiative to improve themselves. This is what King Solomon meant when he said, "He who loves discipline loves knowledge. Such a person loves wisdom, seeks improvement, and strives for perfection." In life, no one is born perfect. We all have our unique traits and struggles. But when a person takes the initiative, whether young or old, they can change and grow. The younger a person is, the easier it is for them to change, but even as we get older, it's never too late. Just like trying to straighten a tree that grew crooked, it may be harder the older we get, but as long as we are alive, it is always possible to change. This is the essence of loving discipline, taking action to improve, striving for spiritual and personal growth. It is very difficult to straighten a tree once it has grown crooked, especially when it has deep roots. When trees are planted in the city, they are young and flexible, and they are supported with stakes to help them grow straight. The stake helps them grow upright, but if no one notices, the tree can bend, and with it, everything else. After 30 years, it's nearly impossible to straighten the tree, because the roots have spread deep into the ground. It's much easier to shape and change a tree when it's young, just as it's easier to shape a person's character when they are young and their soul is still soft and flexible. The older we get, the harder it becomes, but it's never too late. As Rabbi Israel Salanter said, as long as the candle is burning, there is still time to fix things. There's a famous story about him. One night, he left the study hall late, around 1 or 2 in the morning, and was walking home. He lived in the town of Slonim, which was entirely made of wooden buildings. As he was walking, he saw that there was a flickering light coming from the cobbler's shop. This was before electricity, so the flickering light meant the cobbler had left a candle burning on the table and had forgotten to put it out, which posed a danger to the whole town. Such incidents had occurred before. Rabbi Salanter immediately ran to the shop to see if he could help. To his surprise, he found the door slightly open, and he peeked in through the window. He saw the cobbler working diligently, repairing shoes, while the candle was flickering and nearly out. Rabbi Salanter asked him, "At this hour, you're still working on shoes?" The cobbler apologized and replied, "Rabbi, as long as the candle is burning, there is still time to fix things." Rabbi Salanter was so struck by this statement. He always had a way of learning from everything. A simple person could say something, and Rabbi Salanter would adopt the lesson. The next day, he entered the study hall with 200 students and said, "Listen to what I learned from the cobbler yesterday. He taught me that as long as the candle is burning, there is still time to fix things. There's a verse that says, 'The candle of God is the soul of man.' As long as we are alive, we should never give up on ourselves. We can always elevate ourselves, fix things, and change. As we said earlier, it's easier to change when we are young. So King Solomon advises everyone, even if you have never liked discipline, turn yourself into someone who loves discipline. The moment you love discipline, you are defined as someone who loves knowledge, someone striving for completeness. You will discover how much it will contribute to your life and how many problems it will solve for you. Don't wait for someone to wake you up. Wake yourself up. Learn and grow in wisdom." There is a story about one of the Rebbes of the Gur Hasidic dynasty. Today there is the current Rebbe of Gur, the Rebbe of Karlin, and the Rebbe of Belz, all of whom are named after towns in Europe where their ancestors were the leaders of the community. When the Rebbe passed away, it was customary for his son to succeed him as the next Rebbe. However, the Gur Rebbe had a special challenge in the diaspora. The previous Rebbe of Gur, the Imre Emes, was a giant in Torah, an immense scholar, and one of the founders of the Gur dynasty. His eldest grandson was wise, intelligent, and successful. Later, he would become the next Rebbe of Gur when he grew up, and the Imre Emes knew that after his own passing, his grandson would lead the community. The grandfather invested in his grandchildren, especially in this grandson, because he was the one destined to lead. Even though the grandson was still a child, the grandfather took special care to ensure that he would be prepared for leadership. One day, the young grandson noticed his grandfather with red eyes, indicating that he had been crying. The grandson asked him, "Why are you crying?" The Rebbe answered, "Because someone made a picture of me." The grandson wanted to know more, but the Rebbe did not want to pry or ask too many details to avoid gossip. Instead, he asked, "After he made this picture of you, how did you respond to him?" The grandson answered, "I kissed him." The Rebbe was surprised and asked, "You kissed him? Who was this person who drew a picture of you and you kissed him?" The grandson replied, "It was the book of Musar. I took the book, started reading, and saw the things I needed to correct in myself. I realized that I wasn't behaving properly in certain ways, and I cried while reading. Afterward, I kissed the book because it put me on the right path." There's another story about this same grandson when he was a child, even before his bar mitzvah. The grandfather once saw him sleeping at 10 a.m., and he was shocked because it was the time for the morning prayer, the recitation of the Shema. The Rebbe thought that the child was still sleeping and had not prayed. But what the Rebbe didn't know was that the child had been studying all night with his study partner, learning Mishnahs, and had already prayed at dawn. Afterward, he ate breakfast and went to sleep. It wasn't that the child had neglected the prayer, but the Rebbe gently woke him up. When the child woke up, the Rebbe spoke to him with respect and explained the importance of the proper time for Shema, even though the child was not yet bar mitzvah. He explained that the mitzvah of Shema is important and how much reward there is for fulfilling the commandments. After the Rebbe gave him a moral lecture for about 5 to 7 minutes, the child listened carefully. When the Rebbe finished, the child said, "Grandfather, I just want to let you know that I prayed at dawn. I studied with my partner all night and I already prayed. I only slept now because I knew I could hear a lesson from you." The Rebbe asked, "Why didn't you tell me this before?" The child answered, "I wanted to first listen to the Musar, moral lesson from you. Then I could tell you what I did, but I wanted to hear the lesson from you first." The child deeply appreciated the value of the Rebbe's wisdom. This story illustrates the importance of loving discipline and guidance. As King Solomon said, "He who loves discipline loves knowledge." The child understood the value of Musar and loved the wisdom it brought, and this helped shape him into the leader he would one day become. In the Talmud, in the Tractate Avot, we are taught that a person who wants to grow in Torah and acquire Torah knowledge, even if they work for their livelihood, can still learn a lot of Torah. Some people work for their livelihood and possess vast knowledge in Torah. There are ways to acquire Torah, and one of these ways is mentioned in the Mishnah, found in chapter 6, towards the end of the Tractate Avot. It says, "Torah is greater than both the priesthood and the monarchy." This appears in several places in the teachings of the sages, who tell us that there are 3 crowns in Israel: the crown of priesthood, the crown of kingship, and the crown of Torah. The crown of priesthood was given to Aaron and his descendants. Anyone can be a priest, but not everyone can be the high priest. Aaron the priest and his descendants are part of this lineage, and an interesting study conducted at the Technion in Haifa revealed that all priests worldwide share a common gene. The researcher who carried out this study shared his experience of being in a synagogue abroad, where he noticed 2 individuals, both priests, but with completely different appearances. One was tall, with light eyes, while the other had a completely different physique. This made him wonder, both are descendants of Aaron the priest, yet they looked so different. This led him to investigate the genetics of priests worldwide, and he discovered that all priests share a common gene that traces back to an ancient ancestor, and intriguingly, this gene traces back to the time of the Exodus from Egypt, the period when Aaron lived. This is a fascinating finding. In any case, this is called the crown of priesthood. The crown of priesthood was given to Aaron and his sons. There is also the crown of monarchy, which was given to David and his descendants. Anyone who is not a descendant of King David cannot be a king in Israel. Thus, the crown of monarchy was given to David and his descendants. Finally, there is the crown of Torah. It is written that the crown of Torah is available to anyone who wishes to acquire it. Just like a crown is placed on the table, a person can take it and place it on their head. When you study Torah, you acquire wisdom, and this is not inherited or dependent on genes. It is a matter of personal choice. The sages continue saying that the crown of Torah surpasses all other crowns. It is greater than both priesthood and monarchy, as the verse in Kings says, "If you acquire wisdom, you acquire everything." Here, the Mishnah in Avot says, "Torah is greater than priesthood and monarchy. Monarchy is acquired through 30 qualities, priesthood through 24 qualities, and Torah through 48 qualities. The more qualities are required, the more precious it is. To acquire Torah, one must possess 48 traits, and once these are developed, the Mishnah begins to list them. I'll skip most of the list and focus on the parts relevant to our discussion. One of the traits is knowing one's place, meaning recognizing that you do not know everything. Some people don't know their place and speak out of turn, thinking they understand everything. If you want to acquire Torah, you must know your limitations. Another trait is being content with your lot. If you are not satisfied with what you have, you will not be focused on Torah, as your mind will be consumed by desires, and you won't be happy with what you have. Another important trait is setting boundaries for your words. This means knowing when to stop and not holding it over your head when you do something good, not thinking that others owe you anything. Nobody owes you anything. The Mishnah also mentions the trait of being loved by others, meaning that your environment, the people around you, love you. You must love God, love people, and have a love for creation. These are the qualities that enable one to acquire Torah. Finally, we reach the point of loving rebuke. If you want to acquire Torah, you must love rebuke. This means you must be willing to hear when you are wrong in order to correct yourself and strive for perfection. To fully acquire Torah, you need to study these 48 qualities, as mentioned in Avot chapter 6, Mishnah 6. This is discussed in greater detail in the book Treasures of Jewish Wisdom in our expanded explanation. We now want to focus on what is directly relevant to our lesson. Loving rebuke means loving to hear correction when it is offered. Some people open books and learn on their own, gaining wisdom. Others hear rebuke from others and appreciate it. To truly acquire Torah, one must love hearing rebuke and corrections. In the book Tohahat, it is written that when someone corrects you or points out your mistakes, you should be happy about it. The Rambam, Maimonides, testified about himself in one of his letters. When a scholar from Babylon, which was a major center of Torah study at the time, sent him comments on his writings, he apologized, saying, "If I have offended you by pointing out your mistake, I apologize." The Rambam first responded by explaining the source for each of his rulings and why he was correct. He then addressed the scholar's concern, saying, "I am happy when someone shows me my mistake, rather than when someone brings me proof that I was right." This is the opposite of what most people would feel. Most people would prefer to be shown that they were right, as it makes them feel important and grateful. But the Rambam says that he is happier when someone proves he was wrong, because if they had not pointed out his mistake, he might have continued in error. This is the meaning of loving rebuke, being happy when someone corrects you. Now let's consider the question, how should one give and receive criticism? What happens when someone knows they are being criticized for something that is not true? They know they are in the right, but they are still being criticized. It could be someone from their social circle using hurtful words, or it could be someone who attacks them for one small mistake, even though they are generally doing well. How should someone handle criticism that is uncomfortable or hurtful? The king, who was known as the wisest of all men, said a verse, "Let another praise you and not your own mouth." This verse has two meanings. The simple interpretation is that it does not sound good for someone to praise themselves. Let others sing your praises. However, the verse can also be read differently. Let another praise you and not your own mouth. This means that if you see that no one is praising you and only criticism and insults are coming your way, then praise yourself and stand firm. Sometimes people's self-confidence is broken down by constant criticism, even when they are strong and capable. There are families where children are born with healthy minds, but as they grow, they need psychological or even psychiatric help. Why? Because they were constantly subjected to criticism, and no one realized that this was harming them. When someone knows they've been hurt by harsh words, especially in childhood, the effects can be long-lasting. Sometimes parents themselves have gone through difficult lives and, without realizing it, take out their frustration and anxiety on their children, which is a grave mistake. We will briefly look at the guidelines for handling criticism. How then should one give criticism in a way that brings benefit without harming others? But a person who has experienced such an insult, such harm, might say to themselves, "Why should I praise myself? I should tell myself that I have these qualities. What they pointed out to me may be true in this case, but it's not true in many other situations. I need to be honest with myself, even in this area." Another thing a person should say to themselves when they hear insults or unjust harm is, "My standard is not what people think of me, but what God thinks of me." That is, if I know that in the eyes of the Creator I am right, and they are criticizing me for things that are not true, then it doesn't matter. These are just people who are here today and gone tomorrow. How many people were in the world 100 or 200 years ago? Where are they now? They are no longer here. So, should I let their negative opinion of me affect me? They have no real weight. Who are they anyway? The standard I have is God. How does the Holy One, blessed be He, see me? If they rebuke me for something I know is wrong according to God's will, based on the rules and guidance He has given us, then I will change. But not to please people. I will change because it is God's will. I want to be a perfect person, a corrected person, and this gives a person the strength and power not to be hurt by others. They don't need to feel enslaved by people. The sages say that God tells the people of Israel, "You are servants of mine, not servants of servants." We are servants of God and also His children. When He is our King, we are called servants, and when He is our Father, we are called children. You are children of the Lord your God, it says. But God says that a Jew must never feel that they are a servant to another servant. I am enslaved to God, but not to any person. Sometimes we need these affirmations to speak to ourselves and uplift ourselves so that we don't break down because of others. Only when dealing with people to whom one is dependent, such as a teenager or a child growing up in a home where the parents are going through challenges or where siblings are constantly putting them down, should one take these guidelines. Don't break down. Instead, know that I want to walk the path of truth. With the right criticism, I will take it upon myself, as King David said, "When evil people rise up against me, let them hear my voice." What does evil people mean? It refers to people who want to harm me. David had many enemies, and he said, "When those who want to harm me rise up against me and speak about me, let them hear my ears." This means I will listen. Maybe they are right. It's not because they hate me and want to hurt me that I disregard their criticism. I listen with an open mind, and if it is true, I will change. If it's not true, I ignore them. The standard I hold is what God says. When a person lives this way, they have the tools to handle all the destructive criticism from those who have reached a point where they completely break down in terms of self-confidence and joy in life, only because of insults, put-downs, and harmful environmental influences. Now let's move on to the rules of how to properly give feedback and criticism. This applies to relationships, parenting, interactions with neighbors, and any human relationship where something bothers us. How should we handle these situations? First, there is a major principle written in the Talmud, in Tractate Yavamot, page 65b. The text says, just as it is a mitzvah, commandment, for a person to say something that is heard, so too it is a mitzvah not to say something that is not heard. When something bothers us, there's often an impulse to comment or criticize, and when this doesn't go well, we repeat our criticism, and this can cause frustration, both for the person giving the feedback and for the one receiving it. The Talmud teaches us that a person should remember, just as it's a mitzvah to say something that will be heard, meaning something that the other person will listen to and accept, it is equally a mitzvah not to say something that will not be heard. This principle can be extremely helpful in relationships, especially in marriage, with teenagers, or in any relationship where we feel compelled to point out flaws or issues. For example, in a marriage, you might have been asking your husband for years to put his plate in the sink after he finishes eating, but he keeps forgetting, and every time this bothers you, you criticize him again and again, and nothing changes. In fact, it creates tension between you. The Talmud says, just as it's a mitzvah to say something that is heard, it is a mitzvah not to say something that is not heard. The message here is, stop pointing out the same thing over and over if it's not helping. If it's not being received, there's no point in continuing to bring it up. This simple example can be applied to many situations where you feel frustrated, but criticizing over and over only creates tension without effect. I once spoke with a woman whose husband said, He couldn't stand her constant criticism and was even considering divorce. I asked her, "What are you criticizing him about?" She told me it was the same issue that really bothered her, something he repeatedly did that annoyed her. However, it wasn't a serious violation, just something that made her uncomfortable. I asked her, "Why keep criticizing him if it's not helping?" She admitted that it wasn't helping, and even though it bothered her, it wasn't changing anything. It was only making things worse. The lesson from the Talmud is that a person should learn self-control, especially with their words. If there's no real benefit in giving feedback, if it's not being heard, why continue? All it does is create tension. In some cases, we might even have to come to terms with certain behaviors that are unlikely to change. This principle can be a very helpful tool for maintaining peace and harmony in relationships, especially in marriage. The Talmud tells us about Rabbi Zamir, who had a very difficult wife. According to the description by the sages, she was a good mother to the children, but when it came to her husband, she didn't cook for him, didn't do his laundry, and didn't care for his needs. Despite all this, the Talmud says that when Rabbi Zamir would see something in the market that he thought his wife would like, he would buy it, like rice, and bring it home to her, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted to show love and care. He wasn't just doing it because he had to, like when some husbands might buy something for their wives on their birthday or anniversary, just to check the box. Rabbi Zamir would bring the rice with all his heart. His students asked him, "We would expect that a man would divorce such a wife, but you are honoring her, respecting her. Why all the praise?" He responded with a fascinating answer that could provide a lot of strength when dealing with criticism in marriage or with complaints in general. He said, "It is enough that she raises our children and saves us from sin." In other words, before marriage, everyone has dreams and expectations. My wife will do this for me, she will do that for me. But after marriage, Rabbi Zamir realized that his wife wasn't fulfilling all of his expectations. She wasn't very attentive to his needs, but she took care of the children well. Rabbi Zamir said to himself, "I've decided to reduce my expectations to two things. First, that she will take care of the children as she does, and second, that she will prevent me from sinning by keeping me focused on my family and not causing me to think about other women." For these two things, he was truly grateful. In other words, when Rabbi Zamir asked himself, "Do I have a good wife or a bad wife?" he answered, "I have a perfect wife." Why? Because all he needed were these two things, and she provided them excellently. She didn't cook for him, she didn't do his laundry, but he didn't expect her to. He was independent. As long as she fulfilled these two key things, he considered her perfect. He didn't criticize her, and he didn't let it bother him. Rabbi Zamir taught us an important lesson about avoiding criticism, anger, and frustration. We can assume that he spoke to his wife about these things before, but once he saw that she wasn't going to change, he decided to accept it. He had no more expectations, and with no expectations, there were no disappointments. He had a good, happy life. This approach is very powerful when dealing with situations at home, whether it's with a spouse or children. Rabbi Zamir could reach this level of acceptance, but each person can apply it to their own specific, more private struggles. If someone has tried to change a behavior or habit but it hasn't changed, they can come to terms with it and stop criticizing. By doing this, they find peace and happiness. Sometimes parents are very disappointed in their older children when they're in their 20s or 30s, and they continue to criticize them. But it's important to remember the wisdom of the sages. Just as it is a mitzvah to say something that will be heard, it is also a mitzvah not to say something that will not be heard. Every so often, it might be helpful to offer advice or guidance, but it's crucial not to overdo it. Additionally, when giving criticism, King Solomon in Proverbs emphasizes two key things. First, he always uses the word "my son." which conveys love. Second, he adds, if you listen to me, you will benefit. In other words, King Solomon is saying, I'm not doing this for my ego. I want you to change because it will benefit you. This approach is critical in effective criticism. Whether in a marriage or with children, it's important to frame feedback in a way that communicates love and care, not just the desire for the other person to change for your sake. When both sides know that the goal is mutual benefit and not self-interest, it strengthens the relationship. Let's look at some of the verses that King Solomon says. My son, do not forget my teaching, and let your heart keep my commandments, for they will add length of days, years of life, and peace to you. Notice what he says. He starts with my son and says, listen to my instructions. Do you know why? Not because I'm forcing you to listen, but because it will do you good. Length of days, years of life, and peace will be added to you. Listening to these words opens the heart when a person hears that something is being said for their own good. My son, listen to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. I will skip a bit towards the end of the verse. For they are life to those who find them, and health to all their flesh. Hear, my son, and receive my words, and the years of your life will be many. Again he says, my son, listen to me, and happy are those who keep my ways, and so on. Throughout the entire book of Proverbs, we should take this great lesson from King Solomon on how to deliver criticism. Always begin with love, saying, I'm talking to you because I want what's best for you, and if you listen to me, you will benefit. Another verse from King Solomon, do not rebuke a scoffer lest he hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. This verse has two meanings. One interpretation is, if you are dealing with a scoffer, someone who mocks everything, who makes a joke out of everything, don't try to rebuke him, because he will just mock you and hate you for it. He doesn't want to hear criticism. But when you rebuke a wise person, he will love you. In other words, a wise person wants to hear feedback, even criticism, because they see it as an opportunity to grow. But there's another interpretation of this verse. Don't rebuke someone by calling them a fool or telling them they are bad or negative. Instead, rebuke a wise person, and they will love you. Say to them, you are wise, you are good, you are successful. Because you are such a good person, it's not fitting for you to behave the way you just did. You are capable of much more. When the message is conveyed with respect and appreciation, not in a way that insults or hurts, it gives the person strength to change. This approach is especially important in parenting. It's a bit strange that someone who wants to start a business or become an electrical engineer will go to study for many years. But how many people truly invest in learning how to raise children? This is far more important than being an electrical engineer, raising children. A person has children and assumes they know how to act, but that's not always the case. Also, in marriage, many marry without learning how to behave. Thankfully today there are many marriage counselors and guides. Marriage counselors teach both the halachic side and behavioral patterns before marriage. Every couple should go to a guide before marriage. Both the husband and the wife should meet with an experienced guide at least 10 times before the wedding. These meetings cover both halachic topics and relationship dynamics. They save so much later on. But if there are young people who resist the idea of counseling, saying, what can this rabbi teach me? I'll teach him how to behave with a wife. After the wedding, the results are often clear. A wise person loves reproof, as King Solomon says, loves wisdom, loves knowledge, wants to learn, and goes to study how to behave. In parenting, this is even more critical. Rabbi Meir Hadash says, I learned that there are two methods in parenting children. You can either hit the child with your words, strike them, but then you will cause the dirt to stick to them more, and they will also fear you. Alternatively, you can make noise around them, raise them to a higher level, give them good words, compliments, and praise. When they hear praise and the good things you say, and your criticism is done in gentle words, in a constructive manner, focusing only on what needs to be addressed without expanding to unnecessary things, you will discover that your child will be cleaned of bad influences. There is a verse, "A wild city, a man will be born." A person is born like a wild city, but you can clean them, you can build them, you can shape them, and then you will see, as they grow and develop, reaching wonderful levels, and you will be happy with them, they will be happy with themselves, they will have self-confidence, a healthy soul, and a child with a healthy soul is one who has joy in life. They have self-confidence, they do not dominate others to control them, they are sensitive to others, and they have good, refined character traits, and all of this is within reach when following the correct approach. It is also very important to send children to schools that educate them with values like respecting parents, the concept of being a hero by conquering one's desires, and the principle, who is strong, one who conquers their inclinations. When we are raising children, it is our responsibility as parents to raise them with the proper guidance and to shape them toward human perfection to the best of our ability. To conclude, I bless everyone here, all those watching. May God bless you all with health, long life, and may He protect the people of Israel and its soldiers wherever they may be.